Hey Thomas, how you doing?
Good, David. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing good. Thomas, I've always called you Thomas because I like using people's full name. My wife's name is Samantha, and everybody calls her Sam, but I call her Samantha. Do you like to be called Tom or Thomas? It's my
Either
default to
one is
call you by your
okay.
full name. So you got to tell me which.
Thomas makes me feel a little bit more, so I'm okay with that.
Yes,
Certain days I need to feel a
well, I
little
mean,
bit more mature.
it ran in well, and Thomas is the same name they use when you're in trouble, right?
Yes. Well, mom
Yeah.
calls, if she says Tommy, there's shit about to
Ah,
go down, excuse my French. I've done something wrong.
yeah.
So,
So you're in North Carolina, right?
yes, sir,
And what area do you serve in North Carolina?
the entire state.
The entire state.
However, my really my local market has been fruitful enough for me. And, with the mitigation company as well here, I would say the Raleigh market, a little southeast of Raleigh, as well as Asheville, North Carolina, has been the
Okay.
markets of choice here in North Carolina.
Okay. And you're a little bit of an interesting creature because you are both PA and mitigation company.
Yes, sir.
Not on the same claim, obviously, but what that gives you is a perspective that I don't think a lot of other people get. Matter of fact, I think one of the biggest deficiencies in PAs in general is their understanding of the remediation side of the business.
Correct.
It's not that they don't support it, it's just they don't get it. And especially in places like, for example, Florida and a bunch of other places that used to have an AOB. When they had an AOB, the PAs never even dealt with those bills. And so these days, PAs have to deal with that end of the business. And so it's just it puts an imperative that they learn a lot more. But
Yeah, we've talked about this before, David. I think one of the issues in the PA side of the world is their investment back into themselves to learn about the mitigation side, taking a class, getting some meters. It makes a huge difference. And it's just, I think we've talked about it before, low hanging fruit. They go in and say, I can get you your cabinets. They increase the claim $30,000, $40,000. They get a couple $1,000 check and they move on to the next thing. And I don't think, and
right.
I think a lot of us don't think that's the way to go. So I'm intimately involved in the entire process when I'm signed on as a PA.
Got it. I mean that makes perfect sense. So in North Carolina, what is the most normal kind of claim you get in your market as a PA?
Fires, trees on houses.
You you,
Too
you know
big.
that trees on houses and fires. Do people just like to burn North Carolina, or is there just a bunch of old housing, or
It's
what is it?
interesting. In the Asheville market, it's an older housing market. I've got a claim now that I just signed on. The house is 110 years old. A tree fell on it. So, digging into that, and it's just an awesome process. The mitigation company, water was pouring through the house. The mitigation company came in and, yes, sir.
No, on that particular house that's 110 years old, it has all that rough cut lumber, doesn't it?
Yes, sir. And
Okay.
that's really a cool part of it to me.
Yeah. What
Um,
what what about you were saying about the mitigation though? I interrupted you.
that particular house, it's just mitigation. Tree fell on the house, water was pouring in. This is during some kind of quick little storm. Water was pouring into the house. Mitigation company came in, dried it out, pulled everything out that needed to go, and now the carrier is saying no ALE. The kitchen's gone. So we were just talking about that earlier today with no ALE. And sometimes as we go through this process as a PA, I've had times where I second guess myself. I'm like, wait a minute here. Why aren't you
Yeah.
paying for this? You know what I mean? So, and I get stuck and I lose, there's times where I lose confidence. So I reach out to the community on Facebook and, other groups I'm involved in, the Skull group and stuff. And hey guys, I know this may sound like a stupid question, but does this make any sense to you? And the community, the ClaimsTribe, as you talk about, really is supportive. Occasionally we'll get a wise guy or wise gal will just say, you dumbass, you should already know this. I'll take that.
Yeah.
But they're
you know
never
that
going to,
most of the time though. Yeah. But Thomas, most of the time, man, I've just noticed that, sometimes you'll get 5 different answers to it and you'll be able to pick the right one from your experience. And that's just such a giving thing. I'm gonna tell you where I learned the concept of the ClaimsTribe. Okay, there's 2 events in my life that made the concept of the ClaimsTribe. The first one that came up was there was a guy who owned a small mitigation firm, and he was not known to a lot of people. He had no great social media presence, and somebody said, this guy in our business is going to be out of work because his wife had a very bad miscarriage. He's going to be with his wife for the next couple of weeks. She's going to have special surgery. I mean, it's a mess, okay? Like a family emergency. And he said, so what I want to do is I want first to ask everybody to pitch in some money so it takes care of all their immediate needs during this time. The second thing I'm going to ask is I'm going to ask for about 4 guys to get with me so we can go look at his business and look at what needs to be done so we can handle it in his absence.
That's awesome.
And we're going to do this, let him bill for it. We're going to do this pro bono. And people that didn't know this guy just sent the money and volunteered. And it was respectful and it was kind and it was just such a good thing. And then the second thing I saw, and this was probably one of the neatest things I've ever seen in my life. I was on a loss with a PA, and it was an older home and it was going to be a little complex. So he just called me and said, can you walk this with me when I walk it because I haven't really spent a lot of time on it. I want to walk it with the adjuster. Maybe you can help out. Well, I'd walked the loss with him. I'd met the old man that lives there. I met his daughter that lived with him to take care of him. And we had gone to the garage at one point, and this guy had this like early 80s that wasn't running and was dusty and was not even moved in a very long time. And his daughter said, my dad talks about that car all the time. He loved that car. He just loved it more than anything in the world. The PA said, does he drive? And he goes, actually, he does drive. He says he usually likes somebody to be with him, but he drives. He says he's not going to go like cross country, but he'll go up the street and he just likes somebody to be with him because he knows he's a little older and he just wants, make sure that if somebody needs to hit the brake, you can say, hey, hit the brake, old man.
Yeah.
So I go off and I'm just doing my scope. Okay. And I end up walking outside and these guys are outside talking, and they had just broken from a conversation with the daughter. And right then she walked inside, a tow truck pulled up and backed up to the garage and started pulling this Camaro out. This independent adjuster and this PA had decided to split the cost of putting that car back together.
Oh, wow.
And just
That's awesome.
and just dropping it in the garage and never say a word about it, just to his daughter.
Wow.
I thought that was one of the coolest things I'd ever seen. Because
Absolutely.
it was just such a human moment, and they had such a human moment together that like you had 2 professionals have the same kind of will to do it. And like I see that interesting stuff happen all the time. I mean, I was on an appraisal as umpire not long ago. One of the appraisers said, yeah, you need to add this and this and this and this and this to the scope. I can't put it on my sheet. I just can't. It's going to be bad for me. He says, but you need to award that. That guy was in a quagmire, but he still wound up doing the right thing in that quagmire.
That's right.
And that's that very thing. It's that idea that we're not going to do you dishonorably. Now, that's why it hurts sometimes when people in our game do us dishonorably.
Sure.
And I think there are people that get really pinched off from that reality. And I mean, we all see those people. And I mean, like, there are people in the world and there are people among us that think kindness is weakness.
Absolutely.
And
there's a lot more people that, that do the right thing and aren't putting it on social media or talking about it. They just do it because it comes natural to them. And that's an awesome
That's
thing.
right. And, years ago, I got a call from Mike Bowman. He's a PA and he's now an attorney from Pensacola.
That's right.
He's a super guy. He's just a super guy. And anybody who's around him very long will just really like the guy. He's just a good guy, but I'd never met him before. And he called me out of the blue and he said, hey, I've got this appraisal that I need, that the carrier invoked this appraisal, and this is like a $10,000 claim, and this $10,000 is really important for the insured. Could you do that appraisal? And I said, yeah. And he says, well, I'm not taking my fee, so you should be okay on your fees. And I said, no, if you're doing good, I'm going to follow you. And we got that lady your $10,000. Now, Mike had no great claim flow at that point. He didn't. He wasn't doing great financially, but it didn't change the fact that he was going to do the right thing. And that's the coolest. That's the cool stuff we get in this game. Of course, Thomas, I also have another belief about our industry, and it's a little upsetting. I think that there is no business on earth that could be this crazy. Okay? None. I just don't know of another business that would be this crazy. I mean, like, you have things that are episodically crazy, but I'm talking about on a day-to-day basis. But the reason why a lot of us never quit is because everything else now is boring.
Yeah. And I think, it's interesting, over some time, we've all talked about this. The younger PAs, the less experienced PAs, they get into it and they get hit with one of these situations out of the gate, or the carrier just delays. There's no payment, for a year or whatever the case is. They get out. But the good ones, and that have prepared for this going into it, stay in it for the long run. You don't see any PAs going from the PA side to the IA side. It's the IA side coming over to the PA side, because they're adding a lot of value. Generally speaking, we're adding a lot of value to a lot of folks.
You just brought up a good point. Okay. For the first time, we've seen, like, you go out to California and see Seek now taking a lot of business away from the IAs. That's first. Second to that is you see laws like, for example, in Florida, there's always been a law that says that an independent adjuster working for an insurance company has to assess the loss, meet with the insured. They do things like give them their responsibilities after loss, stuff like that. But they changed it where they can send anybody or nobody. Yeah. And I'm watching these PAs, and I mean, I'm talking about more than a few. If I'm getting a few a week that are just calling and talking to me, it's more than a few. And I mean, these guys are just saying, I want to do the work that I chose as my vocation. And in some cases, I'm not able to do it for the carrier because it gets so polluted, or they've started treating me like an estimator, and I never adjust anything. Look on my claim. I had somebody call a DA after going to my job and my loss and say, I can't find a way to make it under policy limits. I'm going to send you a valuation. That's all I can do. And we're 300 days later, and we're not quite there.
Not quite there.
Yeah, and so I mean, I get it, because that guy, that very good adjuster who could have adjusted that claim from start to finish, he's completely out of the process.
Yeah,
completely. And now I have a desk adjuster who is overworked and has very little power.
No power.
And I never say bad things about the desk adjuster. The desk adjuster is the evangelist that will ultimately decide what's important and run it up the line. But when they don't do what they're supposed to do, it's not because they're not doing what they're supposed to do. It's because there's a log jam up the line, And
I think,
I just,
from our side, David, we underestimate, or we think they have a lot more power than they do, right? So, and then we get all irritated with them. We send them, I don't do it anymore. We send them these, aggressive emails, and they're dealing with 100 Tom LaSeares out there that are sending these aggressive emails. So what I've learned through, the ClaimsTribe is to switch the narrative around. Treat them with kindness, treat them with respect. And that has paid off. I mean, almost immediately it paid off for me. And it felt good.
Yeah.
I don't like to write nasty emails.
Well, and the thing is, what I find is the more angry I get, if I force myself to get kinder in response to that, it will turn that situation around. But if I follow my emotion, that's just ego. And that ego is not getting me anywhere.
Or the insured,
I think that I think there's a bunch of misnomers in our industry in general. Like, first of all, like, understand this, and this is kind of an interesting concept that most of us don't think about. Do you know that the IAs? Do you know who they typically know most? They know contractors and PAs. They
Makes
don't know
sense.
other. They don't like get together in a tribe and hang out. They don't have reason to work together very often. So what you'll find is on a day-to-day basis, when I say to an IA, do you know such and such and such and such and such and such? And they go, no. And it's such an interesting concept to see that they are as disjointed as they could be. So on the other side of the business, it's very common for a PA, a mitigation company, a contractor, whatever that works in this field to know all kinds of different people in the business.
Right.
And so I think it gives them kind of a disadvantage on some level because all the feedback they ever get is from people that are not in their game. Like the only independent adjusters they talk to them most of the time is the desk adjusters. That's their whole world.
Yeah,
And
that's interesting. Never thought about that.
I didn't realize that just a few years ago. And like I started getting these IAs to go meet other IAs. Like just ask them if you can ride with them today. Just so they could have some camaraderie within that same thing. And I just find that just like an interesting phenomenon in our game.
Well, we have that on the PA side and the contractor side. We have that on our side of the world.
It's this idea we're on the same team and we communicate and share information. You know, it doesn't like I've always liked this. Like if you're a PA or mitigation company or whatever, it's okay. It's not like hidden data that they're like, you should do this way, because that's not hurting me. That's up in the game for the whole team. Right.
That's right.
And I think there's a mentality of that. And I think it's pretty awesome. Do you know what else I think is absolutely wonderful about our little world right now? Is if you would have gone back 20 years ago, this had never happened. Okay. I have watched within the restoration community, but specifically in roofing, I have watched this sobriety and recovery from alcoholism is like a thing they cheer for. Like they cheer for it. It's like, you know, you go to one of these roofer conventions and they have a 12-step meeting there. And
roofers
like
in recovery, there's a couple groups out there.
Yeah, roofers in recovery. I just think it's awesome. I mean, awesome, because like we have a lot of people who self-medicate in this game, right?
Absolutely.
And you know, like all you have to do is look at your accounts receivable and just be like, oh, I need a drink, right?
Yeah, that's not the truth.
But
We don't have do we?
What's that?
We have upper side. We don't have a in recovery type program. However, we have that bond. Like I've reached out to you or David Sweet, and you know.
What I'm saying is it's like when you go into the like construction field specifically, that's the only field that has more alcoholism in it than food service.
Yeah.
So it's like close to half of everybody in it. So the fact that like it's not being a hidden thing, it's kind of like the day everybody went, hey man, that fall protection's really good. I mean,
maybe we should.
No, like you know, like in Texas had this they published in like 2006 that Texas was the Houston Chronicle posted. You can look it up. It's a really good article that it's the most dangerous. That Texas was the most dangerous place for construction people on the planet.
Really?
And that's because there was no enforcement whatsoever of any kind of regulation for safety. And there still really isn't as much as you'd expect. But industry decided I would rather my people not die. You know, when people die on your job site, there's some forms you have to fill out that are just not friendly.
Yeah.
I mean,
I never have to experience that, but yeah.
Yeah. I had a guy have a heart attack on a roof once and I had to do that. And it was different, you know.
Wow.
But now you want to know something interesting I've been doing is I've been using this tool. This is a filing for a small business, not small claims court filing. For collections. Now, where I live, the small claims court cost me about $400. But as long as the bill is under $8K, I can take it to them. And when I do this, do you know what happens? About the time they get served,
They're
they're going to
paying.
pay the bill, and they're going
Yeah.
to pay for the $400 legal fee, and it works almost every time.
They have to be, the job has to be in your county, or can they be somewhere else and you can
No, they
file?
can be. They'll do it They'll do it on anybody in. Basically, they'll do it on anybody in the state that you're in. Typically, okay. You usually have to go to civil district if you want to do across state lines. But but if they just have if they have a location in your state, I mean, when it comes in, it says summons and
Yeah.
it goes to the right people. And then they go, you haven't paid this for a year. You know, you're going to get pummeled here. Just pay it.
Yeah.
And it's wild how it works.
Then why aren't people paying? I would imagine there's always going to be a certain percentage of your portfolio that is not going to pay, right? Regardless, you just open up and you do everything perfect. There's going to be a certain percentage. But is it that they're scared? They don't have the money. They don't know how to communicate, saying, "Hey."
Okay, first of all, that if you look inside of a lot of insurance carriers, it's not as organized as you might imagine. Like, it's really not. There are a lot of things that are organized, but there are a lot of things that just don't seem to be right. Okay, so there's that, and it always is relying on. It's always relying on somebody to do something to make something happen. So you've never sent an email to an adjuster that just didn't go anywhere, have you?
Never happened to me.
Never happened. And
No.
there's a reason why, like when we do, like, for example, an umpire gig, I do an umpire gig. It's a reason why we collect the name of the adjuster, because we're going to send that billing to the adjuster and we're going to send it to the carrier directly in a way that's trackable, because we can't trust that adjuster to do that, to send it on. And look, there was a day last week, we counted up that I got 712 messages and 355 of them were something that I needed to respond to.
Wow.
Okay.
In one day.
I happen to be real good at that. But, I mean, like when it gets below the fold, it's a problem.
Yeah.
I miss things sometimes. I mean, that's just the way it is. So I just think that like, and then there are other people like I'll give you a great example. We have a company in Florida, Universal Insurance, and Universal on their best day gonna pay you in a year for like sitting for deposition. And I said their best day. Okay. But like they just are absolutely positively terrible about paying. Look, you go to like these insurance guarantee organizations. You've got one in North Carolina, right?
Yep.
Well, like FIGA in Florida. I mean, they always pay their bill when you make a noise, but they're not going to pay it till then because they got too much work to do and they can't get it all done. And then, I mean, and I had a guy tell me in Florida about 2 years ago when all the laws changed. I said, "Hey, could you check on this bill for me? Because like you guys are usually pretty fast with paying these umpire bills." And he
Yeah.
goes, "Oh, you didn't see what happened? We can do anything we want. You'll get paid. Just nobody's in a hurry." And I thought, wow, that was honest and terrible at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. But you knew that
Yeah.
was the answer, right? You knew
Yeah,
that was
I
going to
did.
be, but
So,
he said it out loud.
so Thomas, you deal with a lot of fires. Tell me about what's the hardest thing for you to deal with on fires?
In terms of scoping,
Just whatever. I
or
mean, every loss that you do has a different struggle, and it could be scoping, it could be handling ALE, it could be dealing with adjuster, it could be any number of things. But fire is a specific one because I contend that there's no such thing as a small fire.
no, it's dealing with the insureds. It's, explaining the process, talking to them about what's transpired, what's going to transpire. And I can almost tell them to a T what's going to happen this week or next year or next, in the process. And, it's really devastating to the insured because typically their home is the most important asset they have. And they, their life is in just turmoil. You're experiencing it now, right? You have the knowledge and expectations. They don't have that. They don't have that experience there. to know it's going to take long. And, the certain procedures that need to take place, the testing. And, ALE is a little bit of an issue sometimes because they have an animal, a dog, a cat. I do have a client that has a horse, believe it or not. And that horse has been affected greatly by this fire, because the homeowner was there all the time. And now we're kind of wrapping up this claim at this point, but she had to live off site for a while. So she had to come back every day to feed in the morning and the nighttime and water and all that stuff. And Bobo was the horse's name. And I would go there. It's literally 9 minutes from my house, and go there and chat with Bobo. And you could tell, just the way he was acting, that, he was just all out of sorts as well. And that's something sometimes that, imagine that's the animal, right? Which we all know cats are your babies and the dogs. But this is a horse. And sometimes as an adjuster, we forget to consider those things into the process. And so ALE becomes difficult at times, and just dealing with the homeowner. And, I try to walk them through the process while not trying to be overbearing. Is you're going to get a contents check at some point. I want you to take that and open up a separate bank account so that you can keep track of your receipts. And, because it's going to be chaotic. The contents process is just horrific. It's rigged in favor of the insurance company, as far as I'm concerned. And thank goodness in North Carolina, we have 3 years to go back and, collect on contents. But tracking receipts and when your life is in disarray, and if you have kids and they're transporting because they're living outside the school zone now, because that's the only appropriate ALE they could get. Now they've got to transfer them back and forth. And, there's always the sports and the extracurricular activities, or taking a kid to the doctors. It just adds so much stress to their lives. And there's nothing in there that compensates them for that. And it's devastating.
I've told this story a lot, but the day I had a fire, I walked out of the house, and shortly after the firemen got there, and I was standing on the edge of the property with my wife, just watching just huge amounts of smoke just pour out of every opening in my attic. I mean, just everywhere. And I said to her, hey, listen to me. When you get it's a twofer. And that's what they say in our industry, because it's that kind of trauma.
Yes.
So you and I have to be thick as thieves and know that this pain that's coming is something we got to have together. And it's not you doing wrong or me doing wrong. It's us doing our best. And
that's right.
And, I think about all the people that don't know that, they don't know that it's just that bad. And, sometimes, like even online, I talk about trauma. Okay. Because I don't think people understand the trauma. On the most part, they don't understand. I think public adjusters typically understand this, but I don't think that most people understand the trauma that's associated with an insurance claim. It specifically an insurance claim that causes you to depart your home. Because at that point, you're having to reckon with the fact that your life has changed permanently. And I often say an insurance claim is like somebody calling you up and saying, we're having a party and you're bringing the buns. And you don't want to have the party, and you don't want to go, and you don't want to go buy the buns, but you have to, because you got invited to this party and you're having it. And it's that kind of out of control state.
Yeah.
And, I have these I met these guys up from Chicago, these PAs that they partnered with a mental health group. And every time they went on like any kind of a loss that was going to displace people, they would bring this mental health group in. And if they had insurance that would cover it, they'd do it that way. If they didn't have insurance, they'd still do it. Okay, that was the deal. But the reason why they did it, and I thought this was interesting, they said that there's an extremely high burnout rate on PAs that are in their first couple of years. And the burnout is because they feel responsible for pain. Yeah. And they kind of take it on themselves. And so by doing that, what they did was they took the onus a little bit off the PA, and it made it better. And they said that most of their clients are just like so thankful they did that, because they gave them a safe space to kind of work on like what's going on with us. And it kind of says to them, hey, you're having a big issue right now. You should be having issues between your ears. You should be. And I think just that knowledge, I think that's just awesome.
Yes.
And
There's
anyway, but I
I
mean,
don't remember who it is, but there's a PA firm now that is hired on staff, I believe, assistant, crisis management person or two people to help their insureds through this process. Because keep in mind, think about this, we're talking about residential. Let's talk about a small and medium sized business owner that experiences just a fire. They've got inventory. They've got their vendors calling on them, all that stuff. There's so much pressure on those guys and gals that it's such a needed thing. So whoever's doing it, I'm at a much smaller scale than a lot of these bigger companies. But that's awesome.
I'll tell you a one that I always remember super well about it was a small fire in a restaurant. And a fire in a restaurant is just a bigger problem than it is most other places because it's food service, right? And this was in Brooklyn. And I remember it on a couple of levels because I remember there was no place for us. We couldn't get to the roof, but we had to see the roof. So we had to fly a drone, but there was no place for us to sit to bring the drone up. And so we stood in a circle in the middle of a crowd and shot the drone up between us. We just made a hole in the crowd and shot up. It was crazy. It was crazy, dangerous and stupid, but it was fun. But anyway, we're in this loss and we're looking at it and we've been there like 20 minutes and it's with a PA out of New Jersey he's one of the best PAs I've ever known because he reads a policy like twice or three times every time he gets it. Even if he's seen it 100 times, he reads it and he adjusts based on policy. That's all he does. That's his entire game. And it has served him so well. But we're standing there and we're doing our thing. And these guys just walk in the door and they all say, hey, when are we going to get to come back to work and need to get back to work? One of the guys said, yeah, I mean, we love our boss. He had a thing where we get paid for being off, but I don't want to get paid for being off. Yeah. I want to come back. I got to come to work. I work here. There's a bunch of people that rely on us every day here and I want to be here. And And I just never put it in place until I did that to that level that, we always think about this place being somebody's home or this being somebody's business. We don't think about all the somebodies that it serves and work there. And it's an awesome thing to think about. And, that's one reason why I think brokers could do a substantially better job with all kind of policy issues. I think we ought to have to buy insurance policies from brokers, period. I don't think we should be able to buy them directly because I think a broker can say to you, hey man, you need this coverage and this coverage and this coverage. And for the places where the broker carries liability, that's also nice too. But,
sure.
but like you see
Is it the broker's fault, David? And listen, I've been guilty of what I'm about to say prior to being a PA years and years ago. I didn't take the time to understand my policy. I remember the first house I bought was many moons ago, and we picked up the phone and said, Bob Sill was the State Farm agent. I said, Bob, I'm buying a house. You have my mom and dad's policy. Give me a policy. And he said, done. Pay me, whenever you come, whenever I see you, just pay me. We as consumers, it's so important. Our insurance policy on our homes are so important, right? In the time of need. And if you don't do it prior to that, it's too late. Spend a few minutes looking at the policy and asking questions. And I know there's PAs out there that will be happy, or any other insurance professionals, IAs, that will say, these are the things you need to look at. You're a non-matching state, but for $25 more a year, we can add a matching endorsement. And I'm just using numbers. So we don't look into it enough.
I tell people to do what I typically do. And even I make bad decisions. Okay. And that is that I want you to tell me about every policy I can have. I want every provision I can have. I want sewer backup. I want a higher level of theft. I want $1,000 deductible on all perils, no percentage deductible. I want no limit on water. I mean, just on and on and on and on. I want this much ordinance and law. Like on my policy, I said they were offering me originally they were offering me $78,000 for my additional living expenses. I'm like, no, you got to get that up to 300. They go, why? And I said, because I need to be able to be gone for 2 years, and I live in a place that fills up with tourists every summer, and that could get really dangerous for me.
That's it. Yeah.
And then I also said, they said, well, your house is worth X. And I said, no, you got to insure it for $100,000 more than that, because I live in a place that doesn't have real good infrastructure. So all that labor is coming from somewhere else. So it's going to be more expensive. Yeah. So I've got an increased cost of construction. I also need to see increased cost of construction. And with all that, nice. With doing all that and being so responsible, I still did less than $300,000 worth of contents. And you cannot be an adult over the age of 50 and have a house and have probably less than $300,000 worth of crap in your house.
Yeah.
I mean, unless you're just one of those people who's a real minimalist.
Yeah.
And chances are good you have a bunch of things in that house that aren't replaceable.
That's right.
And, and what did I do? And see, this is the reason why a broker would be good is, during my EUO, they said, Mr. Herring, we have to ask you, I know this is offensive, but we have to ask you if you started the fire. And I said, no, I can prove I didn't. And they said, how can you prove it? I said, well, the piece of furniture that caught fire had like $85,000 worth of unscheduled jewelry on it. I said, I assure you, if I was going to burn the house, that wouldn't be where I started.
That's right. That's right.
But
did they laugh at that?
But look, yeah, they laughed. They had a good time with it. Yeah, they I mean, it helps that I did some expert work for the people that were doing the EUO. So, but at any rate, the point is that I was way low on contents, and I think probably a good broker would have said, you have a 5-bedroom home, you need more than that. Okay. I mean, I'm sorry, when you got $35,000 worth of beds, before we even talk about dressers and other things, I mean, your wife's closet's probably worth $70,000.
And the shoes.
Yeah, that's before the shoes. Yeah. Yeah. But what did I miss? Let's just talk about what I missed. I didn't a good broker would have said, schedule the jewelry, schedule the pottery, get an agreed amount for these pieces of furniture. Because most people don't realize you can do an insurance policy that schedules this. It says you agree that this is worth $12,000. But because I got all these things really covered on my policy really good. And I mean, I did pretty good. There were just some things I really missed bad when it comes to contents. I mean, I'm a dingbat when it came to contents. I never knew that I had that many contents. It scares me to know I had that many contents.
So as I tell folks now, we all have our cell phones, right? Walk around our homes, take some videos, take some pictures of serial numbers, just so because God forbid that time comes and something happens, a catastrophic loss, you have some idea what's going on. And I'm hoping what's happening is when they're taking the videos and taking the pictures, they're saying, wow, we have a lot of stuff. Maybe we need to talk to our carrier or our broker or someone to say, we don't think we have enough coverage. But that's hard to do because you don't think about that loss until it's too late.
Because you minimize it. Yeah. Because you minimize it.
Yeah. So,
and I mean, well, I mean, I live in a place that has no, it's a zone X, so it has no need for flood coverage. And I have flood coverage.
Yeah.
And my neighbor asked me the other day, said, why do you, and I said, because about every other month somewhere they have 1,000-year flood. And, I mean, and how many times do you have to watch somebody say, we never had water here before? Ever. I talked to this lady on Long Island one time. It was hilarious. I mean, it was sad, but it was hilarious. So I'm standing on her stoop, okay? And you can see two oceans from her stoop, okay? And I said, so tell me again why you didn't have flood coverage? She says, we just never needed it before. I'm like, you live less than 50 yards from like two major bodies of water. What's wrong with you? And
Yeah.
it was just hilarious.
I've had this
But,
discussion with my
you know,
parents,
but yeah,
and I said,
you know that,
I'll find out, and they live down at the North Carolina coast or off of the coast, but I'm like, just inquire about it because there may not be, if you're not part of the certified area, whatever that, you may not be able to get it, right? Or it may be extremely expensive. So, but I said, in case you can, it may be $400 a year, $500 a year. And I know, being a fixed income and all that stuff is, you try to tighten it up. But I said, the one time it happens, it's paid for that. I don't care if you had the flood coverage for 10 years, Dad, you got to have it. It's worth it. At least look into it for me. So, yeah, they didn't do it. So,
well, there's this other thing that they can do on the insurance that I had done several years back when I couldn't get a policy that didn't have a hurricane deductible. They gave me another policy with it that gave me like $1,000 deductible that I had to pay to this insurance, and it would pay my insurance deductible. So yeah, so you basically got insurance. I mean, you can insure anything, right?
Sure.
And so what they had done was the broker had found there's these people who will. I mean, think about it. It's got to be a great model. Think about it.
Is this a Lloyd's type
you go sell 1,000 of those? Yeah, you go sell 1,000 of those, and you get like 10 of them, where you actually have to pay like 20 grand.
Yeah.
Like what a deal. I mean, like they probably, from an actuarial position, that's like a really, really smart thing.
Yeah.
But I don't know. So what do you think? What do you think the rest of the hurricane season is going to look like?
I try not to. First of all, I have not really heard Mr. Hearing talking about pickles, so that's a little bit of a concern for me. I think you've mentioned.
Well, let me tell you, I will know when I start one of those pickles again. I will know.
Yes,
I will know.
and then the rest of us who are aware of that will know as well. So you've mentioned it a few times, but nothing has been definitive yet. So,
well, I just think that I just don't think there's any way on earth that we're not going to see one of those that, like the ones that come in the Gulf and then just turn and go, straight up like the East Coast or, across the East Coast or wherever. And I mean, like, I remember like even during some of these where I would get like hurricane claims to go look at in like Georgia, mid Georgia, that were like legit claims. Do you know what I found in the last little while though that's kind of interesting to me? I think all of us should go to the middle of the country where there are no hurricanes and follow other people around that assess losses, because those people find damage in a way that most people that live close to the coast don't, because most of our stuff has like lights on it, like damaged.
Yeah.
But most of their stuff doesn't. But like I work with this PA out of Tennessee, and he's a very interesting creature, but like he's going to send me on the next like appraisal he gives me, he's going to send me like this really extensive photo book of like every aspect of the loss that has something. He's going to tell you why it's damaged. And he's usually going to give you a picture that he took at night because he could see it better.
Wow.
Like this guy commonly at 7 or 8 at night, it's like, oh, I'm going on a night inspection. I'll call you later. Like,
that's awesome.
No, and you think about it though. You think about like how many times have you had to do an exterior inspection where the sun was probably limiting your ability to see some things, and then if you got an overcast day, you could see it a lot better. But he just forces the overcast day by using the night inspection. We're doing night inspections right now on our large loss team in Brownsville, Texas, on a bunch of mini storages, because it's one, you can't use your phones during the day because it's so freaking hot.
Yeah.
But we're finding we can find better stuff at night. It's just nice. But we should just, I'm telling you, we should just pay attention to these people in the middle of the country, because these are students. I think about this guy that is this construction guy I work with out in Kansas. I mean, this guy, when I tell you he writes down to the freaking last screw, he does. He knows exactly what's damaged and exactly what it's connected to. And,
Right.
you know, it's just fun to see. I think that you said something a few minutes ago, a little while ago, about that old loss that you were doing that was fire. And we were talking about it had rough cut lumber.
Yeah. That was that particular house where it was a tree.
This is always it's always interesting to me on these locations that have that rough cut lumber. Okay. Because first, that rough cut lumber is better than what we have today by a lot. Okay. So if we replace it with conventional, we're replacing it with something that violates the rules of RCV, right? Because RCV is as good or better, right? Well, so like I've seen it before where you lost that argument and they put contemporary stuff in it. But when I saw like 2 months ago, which was so interesting to me, was they had settled the claim appropriately and they milled that rough cut on the property. Like they brought all it in and they brought all the cutting and they just did it right there on the property, which is how it was originally done. They actually had pictures of how it was originally done, actually, which was kind of cool. But they really did. They did the same thing over again, and it was something to see, man. It was really something to see. And
yeah,
like
awesome.
I've one in Tennessee that the building is 130 years old. It has a basement and then 4 floors over it, and it is all this rough cut lumber, and it's immense and it's beautiful. And I'm very afraid that the results of the claim is going to be that it's going to have to be rebuilt.
Yeah.
And that's going to be an interesting concept.
Yeah.
Because my problem is like, I think to rebuild that, it would probably cost, I think the building's probably worth $3 million and it probably cost $7 million to rebuild it that way.
Every bit of it.
Yeah.
I know of a loss up in Asheville area. I'm not the PA on it. They had granite siding from a particular creek there in Asheville that they had sourced from there, and there was a fire,
right,
and that granite was damaged. So they were going to have to go out and detach some of the stuff and go get the replacement from it. It's a historical house, so the Historical Society was involved in it. I wish I had been signed on to that, just because that stuff is really, really cool to me. That's just so interesting, and yeah, really cool, actually.
Well, I mean, that, and I just find that the concept, I was talking about that PA from New Jersey it's one of the best PAs I've ever met. I saw him on a claim say to somebody once. He says that stud, that wall over there, I want to replace all the stud work on it. And they said, well, we're gonna just clean it and encapsulate it. He said it wasn't encapsulated before the loss.
Right.
I want the same thing back as we had before. He's kind of right. It's kind of hard to say he's right, but he's kind of right. And no, we don't need to tear down every structure that has a fire. That's not what I'm saying. But I mean, it's, up in Connecticut, they have a different theory of insurance than most other people have. Their theory of insurance is that it is to maintain your equity. So it's basically to put you back where you haven't lost any equity. And in most losses, if you would agree across the nation, it's often less than when you really get down to it. Okay. Like, for example, if I come and encapsulate your attic because you had a fire, that's not adding to the value of the property, is it? It's taking it away from the property, isn't it?
Correct.
So their theory of insurance means that some things don't get scoped the same way there. It also means they have a really good matching statute that's like saucy goodness. Nice. I mean, it's like getting a massage. When you get it, when you figure out that you could like actually get this and this and this and not fight about it, you're like, oh, that's wonderful. But
nice. And I've heard other people making that argument. Some other PAs about that this is a pre-loss condition after cleaning it, even using a serum to draw, peroxide type product, and then to seal it up. That's not pre-loss conditions. So right. Yeah, interesting.
I have a question for you about one thing that I don't see in scopes anymore for mitigation. We used to see all the time where at the end of the project, we would do a chemical wash under the base plates and then we would dry. And I don't see that anymore. Why not? Is it no longer a good idea? or did we just stop doing it because you can't, out of sight, out of mind?
I think it's out of sight, out of mind. And I think, from the mitigation side, what a lot of mitigation companies don't understand is they're assuming the liability on these claims, right? Insurance company, David Sweet talks about this all the time. When you sign up to do a mitigation job, the insurance company is pushing all that liability to you. So out of sight, out of mind, not knowing that's a potential source of contamination. Think about it, you get sewer losses all the time. That sludge and stuff goes underneath that bottom plate. And this is typically a treated wood, which takes that much longer to dry out. And if it's on a porous concrete, it's going to take forever. So they're taking on this liability. They're not drying it out properly. Some point, someone's going to get bit in the butt.
They will. And I mean, look, I've seen various times in my career where even the carriers have done huge amount of subrogation against contractors, just huge amount, where, somebody comes with a claim and says, I have this problem. And they say this is because your last contractor, and they just go after the contractor. And, I know some guys that aren't in business anymore because of that.
Yeah.
And, I just, you've heard me say it before, the concept of clean and dry is such a moral imperative. It's hard to do.
Yeah.
Because I don't care if you've done 1,000 losses, all of those losses had slightly different scientific facts about them. And it's the only part of our business where we have to employ science in everything we do. And I think that most people, even in our business, don't recognize that that's really what has to happen. Like, how do you think we figure out how much drying we're supposed to do here? How do you figure, what protocol we're going to use to clean this stud? When do we use negative air? And why do we use negative air? And what kind of filtration we used and why? I mean, there's just so many whys. You do so many things, and you may have 40 losses that look similar but have a difference in every one. And I couldn't do that job. I did manage some work on mitigation in my career. It had a lot of particularities that I did not like, because I always was having to go back to the brains and say, okay, so how long do we need the desiccant in here? And what other equipment's supposed to be in here while the desiccant's in here? And if we get it above 120 degrees, we're going to destroy the drywall. So you can't do that. Do we need air conditioning instead? There's a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the large majority of mitigation companies out there want to do the best job possible. I truly do. However, we're rushing, right? Because the payments are so delayed, the getting in, and the carriers, sending out the third parties. I think sometimes they just cut the corners, not intentionally. They're not trying to hurt anyone. They cut the corners, and they can't do that. It's detailed work.
I think that when the next storm comes, we're going to see a lot of mitigation companies and a lot of construction companies say, here's what it's going to cost. You'll need to pay this so we can start. Have a nice day.
The biggest mitigation company out there, that's exactly what they do.
And it's a hard
form right there.
Yeah, and it's a hard master to follow. But I mean, I'll give you an example. In Florida, like for my umpire stuff. Okay, in Florida, we bill after the fact. Pretty much everywhere else on the planet, all the umpires get paid up front or before they release an award, right? Because of the same thing I have to deal with on a daily basis. At some point that's going to change, because it's the only way you can do it and not have to spend, I joked with somebody the other day. I said, I spend around $120,000 a year on personnel resources just to collect money.
Yeah.
That is a huge investment just for that one purpose.
Yes.
And, at some point, I'd rather make the 120 than spend the 120. So maybe that'll ultimately change. I just find it, I just think that more often than anything else, when you think about, I have a dog on my newest hat. No, but I just there's not one piece of our game which specificity isn't required. Like, you think about most other businesses, if it, we don't have that degree of specificity. We talk about my estimation team, they're supposed to write an estimate and represent every single piece of that puzzle, right? Specificity. You're supposed to dry a building with specificity about what's wet and what you're drying. You know, as a PA, you've got to know soup to nuts what's going on, every system that's affected, how deep it goes in the building. They say that what restorers have, they say that the restorer often has to look deep into the structure to find the source of water or the source of the loss. And PA really, at the end of the day, really an IA for really, but everybody, all the adjusters that look at the project are really supposed to be beyond that. They're supposed to be that kind of specific. And I just find it like, you have to send a certain contract. You have to use a certain contract. You have to do certain things at a certain time. You have to send a letter of representation. You have all these things that are just so in a box. And I find that I can't find a lot of businesses, I should say, that have that degree of an imperative on something that changes all the time. Maybe a firefighter.
Exactly right.
Maybe a firefighter, but that's episodic. And they can tear things up and we can't. I mean, it's true. Like, how many times have you gone to a fire and the fireman did more damage than the fire, but they kept it from, yeah. I think that I used to have this PA that I worked with that every time he worked a fire, I thought this was the coolest idea. Every time he worked a fire in a particular market, he'd find out who the fire department was that did it, and he would send a check for like $300 to the fireman's fund. Wow. With a note that says, thank you for minimizing this loss in a way that I'll be able to get, Miss Smith back in her house. You responded quickly, you cared for her greatly, and I'm just, thank you. Do you know what happened to him? Those firemen started saying, hey, you need to call such and such. Yeah. It worked out really good for him. I don't think he really thought it was going to do that in the beginning, but he ended up with like 7 municipalities where the cops where the firemen were always referring him stuff. But Anyway, I guess the dogs want me to be off this call. But I gotta go. I got a few things to do. I hope you have a good holiday.
Yeah.
And you do anything good for the holiday?
Yeah, working.
Yeah, I know.
Yes, but that's okay.
We're supposed to pretend like we're going to have a holiday.
Oh, yeah. I'm going to just really relax and get some stuff personally done.
TV, flip some steaks. Yeah, whatever.
Yeah. Drink, just drink a couple beers.
In the office at the same time.
Yahtzee and, have fun.
Oh, my.
Thank you, Dave.
I have to actually before the end of my day, I have to wish my desk adjuster a good holiday and tell her that I really had hoped to hear from her before this holiday, but it'll be great to hear from her right after.
Nice. Continue to kill her with kindness.
Yeah, super nice.
It may be 5 years down the road, but it will pay off for you.
Thomas, I always say this to people. You are a great example of somebody who came to this industry later in your career and have taken 2 pieces of it and managed to thrive. And I think I think that's a testament to you, but I think a lot of people could watch how you do your work and how you've done it. I think you set the bar for people really well. And I think one of the reasons I like talking to you is you have such good perspective on such a broader range of things because of your former work and this work. And I just think it's awesome. I'm glad to call you a friend.
Thank you, David. I feel the same about you because you were one of the people you remember. I don't know, 3-4 years ago, I would send you a one-off message. How would you handle this? How would you do this? And you were always there for me. And I appreciate you.
I try to help anybody who's looking for help. It's cool because sometimes, for example, we'll write a fire scope for somebody, specifically fire. Okay. We'll send it to somebody and we'll get a call back from them and go, my God, I didn't know we were supposed to do those things because we've actually given them advice that's going to change the scope of how they work. And I think that's awesome. Matter of fact, we do it for roofers on occasion because they don't realize that they have enough, they're high enough and they have enough quantity to actually use scaffolding and chutes. And they'll be like, we could do that. I'm like, yeah, you don't have to just throw it.
Yeah. David, I don't know if you remember, it was just a couple of weeks ago. I think it was 2:00 in the morning. I sent you a message. Are you awake?
Yeah.
And you responded to me within 2-3 minutes. And I was asking about how to look up the audit thing and or whatever. That says a lot about you, David. You're always available for folks. Hopefully it's not always at 2 a.m.
All right.
But
Well, I appreciate that.
many of
And
us appreciate you. I know I do. And I know there's a lot of other people out there that appreciate you.
well, thank you. That's
what you
kind.
do.
We're never going to get it right. We're just endeavoring to be perfect.
Yeah.
And that's all we can do, right?
That's right. Do the best we can.
All right, my friend.
I appreciate
Well, have a good
you.
holiday.
Have a good one.
Thank you.
You too, bud. See you, man.
Thanks, brother.